Hello, Gold Derby. I'm Daniel Montgomery. I'm here with Gold Derby contributor Tony Ruiz, who is a huge fan of Transparent. So we're here to actually do a slugfest, specifically highlighting Transparent and its awards prospects this year. Tony, how much do you love Transparent?
Oh, let me count the ways. I have said many times to you privately that Transparent, this batch of 10 episodes, I think was the best. It was my number one show of the year, of the entire season. On the night that it came out, I binged the entire season, and I've seen the whole season probably 3 times. And individual episodes I've seen even more than that. I just think they took what they did last year and completely even improved upon it. I mean, it was so deep and rich and multi-layered, and I just loved it. I think it's a masterpiece. I'll be interested to see if they can top this for season 3, but I can't see how they can. But yeah,
I envy your ability to watch a show 3 times in one season, because I'm still catching up on shows from like last summer that I haven't caught up on yet. So I look forward to revisiting some of these in the next 3 or 4 decades. But let's start. I want to talk about first talking about topping last season. It was nominated for 11 Emmys, and it won 5 of them. So I just want to go over quickly what those were. The 5 awards it won were obviously Best Actor in a Comedy for Jeffrey Tambor. That was a pretty solid lock last year, if nothing else. Best Directing in a Comedy for Jill Soloway for the episode Best New Girl. Best Guest Actor in a Comedy Series for Bradley Whitford. Best Original Main Title Theme Music for Justin O'Halloran. And probably the most surprising to me last year, which is I think it was the first award it won at the Creative Arts Awards, which made me think, oh my goodness, it's just going to win everything, which was Outstanding Costumes for a Contemporary Series, Limited Series, and Movie. And it was up against like the high fashion Empire White Party episode, which I was just like, if they awarded Transparent there, they're not going to give anything else any other awards but Transparent. It didn't quite end up going that way. But those were the 5 awards it won. The 6 nominations it didn't win were Supporting Actress in a Comedy for Gabby Hoffman, who was a bit of a surprise to get into that category over the better-known Judith Light. Jill Soloway for Best Writing in a Comedy for the pilot episode. Best Casting. Best Production Design for a Narrative Program. Best Comedy Series, which it lost to Veep. And Best Single Camera Picture Editing for a Comedy Series. So pretty good haul. Single camera prestige comedy tends to do better in creative arts, craft categories, like craft categories like editing and those sorts of things than other sitcoms, especially like multi-camera sitcoms. So do you think it will maintain the total, go up or go down in terms of its nominations count this year?
I think it has a really good chance of going up. I think comedy series, I mean, just critically, the show was even stronger with critics for season 2 than it was for season 1. I think season 1 was a 91 on Metacritic, and I think season 2 was a 94. I think the Rotten Tomatoes one was higher too. I think it's going to come back in comedy series. Tambor's coming back. He's probably a front runner to win. It wouldn't surprise me if Gabby Hoffman came back. And there's more in terms of guest actors, in terms of the number of guest actors that are at least submitted. And we're not talking, Bradley Whitford will probably be back because he's Bradley Whitford, even though he has very little screen time in this second season. He plays a completely different character. But with Angelica Houston coming back in, Melora Hardin, who had just an absolute dynamite scene in the second episode of the season. I think writing and directing could come back. They've certainly submitted some of their strongest episodes, which we can talk more about later. And I also think that Jay Duplass really has a good chance of getting in. And if he can, he's got, and I wrote about this recently, that if he gets in, he's got a dynamite episode, assuming that the episodes matter. But yeah, I think it could easily get 11, if not more.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. I think a couple of key places that I'm going to be paying attention to, obviously the guest acting categories, because actors like Angelica Houston could get in on name alone no matter what show they're on. But being on Transparent gives her a further boost, and she was nominated for Critics' Choice, which combines men and women into one guest category. So to get into that category, put her on put her on the radar even more so. So I think we could see that happen. I think Bradley Whitford gets in by default. One interesting thing I'm really interested in seeing is what happens in supporting actress in a comedy. Last year there were 8 nominees. All 8 are eligible to come back this year. So it'll be interesting to see. Some combination of them could all come back, and someone has to be snubbed unless there's another huge momentous tie. But it'll be interesting. I think even with that, I think there's a chance that Transparent could increase its haul in supporting actors. I really felt season 2 was a lot more about the women, the supporting women in many cases. In addition to Gabby Hoffman, Judith Light, who is also well known, and she was a previous Emmy nominee for Ugly Betty, and she's a TV veteran, a 2-time Tony winner. She's a respected actress. She didn't get in for season 1. It seems like she's the kind of person who could climb aboard in season 2. But then there's Amy Landecker, who I actually think had the strongest material of the supporting women in season 2. And she hasn't been nominated for an Emmy, but she's got an impressive resume. She's got this show. She did several guest spots on Louie that I thought she could have gotten and should have gotten Emmy nominations for. So this could be her moment to break out, especially if the show is starting to build, which I think it might be. It reminds me a little bit of Ally McBeal as it started to add supporting cast members to those nominations in later years.
And I think one person that can never be counted out is Cherry Jones, who has a big, she kind of feels more like a guest star in the season, but because of the way the rules of the Emmys are in terms of the number of episodes that she appeared in, she's in the supporting category, and she's a past Emmy winner, past 2-time Tony winner, and basically a one of those actors, one of those actors with a capital A, who everybody respects and admires, and so I wouldn't count her out of being nominated either. I don't have her in my predictions right now, but it would not surprise me.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me either, especially because she has 3 shows she's eligible for this year. She's in this category for Transparent, comedy supporting actress. She's eligible for drama guest actress in Mercy Street on PBS, and movie miniseries supporting actress for 11/22/63, the Hulu miniseries. So if Emmy voters are paying attention, they've probably seen her in something and liked her. And we know they liked her in 24, where she managed to win an acting award. After that show had sort of dipped in terms of esteem, she's the only supporting actor from that show to ever win an Emmy, the only president to win an Emmy from that show, the only non-Kiefer Sutherland to win an acting Emmy for that show, to be fair. So, we know she's got a lot of love, and yeah, I wouldn't count her out. She could be one of those big surprises, and one of those, if she gets in, and if there's a number of names in the supporting actress category for Transparent, I think that might be a sign that it could potentially threaten Veep in Best Comedy Series. It won Best Comedy Series at the PGA Awards. It beat Veep there. So do you think that it has a strong chance at beating Veep?
As much as I would love to say yes, I don't think so, because Veep won for, I think, what a lot of people last year, and myself included, and I'm a huge Veep fan, but I don't think season 4 was its strongest, and it won last year. This season has been, I think, its best season, and just one near perfect episode after another. And so I think Veep is pretty much unstoppable. And Transparent does have a problem in the fact that it is not, for all intents and purposes, it's not funny. There was all that discussion. We had the discussion last year about, is Transparent even a comedy? And it certainly was more in the dramedy, fits the dramedy level label. This season, it was almost all drama. There was very little comedic material in the show this season. But the category is not titled funniest comedy series. It just says best comedy series. So I think if anything is going to, I don't think Silicon Valley has the momentum that it has in previous years. I don't think this season was as good as previous seasons. I'm not a huge fan of the show myself. But Transparent could definitely be, it certainly has this, it's put Amazon on the map as far as, really good streaming content, something to rival Netflix. And it's possible. We'll just have to see. I'll be interested to see what its nomination total, because I think that'll give us a clearer picture about, will it increase its momentum going into the Emmys?
Yeah, I think I have Transparent in first place for best comedy series, and it's not confident. It's very tentative, just because I don't want to be in lockstep with everyone else saying Veep, 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 because I'm pretty sure that's what everybody else is going with. And for the most part, I'm going with most of last year's winners, just because of the new voting system. Seems like more of a popular vote that winners will just carry over from year to year, like at SAG, that often happens. But it will really come down a little bit like Modern Family. Like this time last year, we were all thinking, oh, Modern Family is going to win a 6th Emmy for best comedy series. And then the nominations came down, and we saw the huge shortfall for Modern Family, gone from both writing and directing. It was basically out of the running from the minute the nominations were announced. So it'll be interesting to see how those nominations line up, and in what categories, where it overperforms, where these shows underperform. I think Transparent will be back for comedy series, writing, and directing, which is a powerful trio. And then assuming it gets back into editing, gets back into casting, Veep will be on its toes. So it'll have to depend on if one show overperforms, if another show underperforms. I have a feeling the numbers will be more or less similar to what they were last year, at least for Transparent. I don't know if Veep might go up, it might go down. It's 5th year. The showrunner last year, even though, as you say, Veep had a really great season this season. The showrunner left last year, and sort of like The West Wing, never won drama series again after Aaron Sorkin left. So it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out. But I think comedy series is probably a little bit more of a question mark than comedy actor. Is there any chance that Jeffrey Tambor loses? I don't think so.
I don't think so either. He's just so on a roll. He won Critics' Choice for the 2nd time in a row. He won SAG. And to me, there's no stopping him. I think if anybody's going to upset Tambor, it's going to be Anthony Anderson, because he has that great episode of Blackish called Hope that really has some topical stuff. But again, we have to address the elephant in the room, which is the new voting system, whether or not the episodes matter to the same degree that they used to. Now, that being said, Tambor's likely episode, I think everybody agrees that his best submission is Man on the Land, which was pretty much universally acclaimed, and it's been submitted for writing and directing. That it's a stellar work, piece of acting that he does in that episode. So the fact that he's Tambor, and the fact that he's still got all this love from all the guilds and the critics, I think he's unstoppable. But I don't think he's an absolute lock. I think he's very, very strong front runner. But anything can happen. I wouldn't count it as a lock yet.
I don't want to call anyone a lock at the Emmys, because the Emmys. But it's hard for me to imagine him losing. I wonder. Really, it's a little early to tell. But the way the show is going, the way comedy actor has not been as fertile a category in the last 5 or so years as it has been in years past. It just seems like it's the right time for him. Like, he's positioned well to just keep winning this thing. It will have to come down to unless the show decides to end its run early. I don't know how what Jill Soloway's plan is in terms of the long view of the show's story.
Well, it's already been renewed for a 3rd and a 4th season.
So he'll at least catch Julia Louis-Dreyfus's consecutive record if things.
And we know how much the Emmys love to repeat, as particularly in a lot of these lead actor. I mean, Alec Baldwin won 2 in a row before he didn't win again. Parsons, has won 4. So there is this whole thing where he could easily, at least he's got to win one more. If you look back at the history of this category, there's a lot of repeat winners, and a lot of them are consecutive. Don Adams, Michael J. Fox, they win 3, sometimes 4 in a row before they move on to something else.
It's interesting that before last year, the idea that Jeffrey Tambor had never won an Emmy. He'd been nominated for supporting for Larry Sanders Show and for Arrested Development. He couldn't get arrested by the Emmys. I feel like in 2 or 3 years we're going to be like, oh, Jeffrey Tambor wins again. And by the time now that with the new voting system where it seems to be more of a popular vote potentially, it looked like that yesterday. We don't know how it's going to shake out this year, but I don't know. Depending on how long the show runs, he could pull a Baldwin at SAG and win 7 years in a row, and then we'll be sick of him. At least I will. I don't think anyone deserves to win 7 in a row with the level of quality there is on TV these days. But it could happen. I mean, we could see that happen to Julie Louis-Dreyfus in the comedy actress category, certainly. So that will be interesting. I don't personally see him losing. I don't see. Anthony Anderson is really good, but Blackish will need to explode for me to think that he's a really strong challenger. I think it could, but that's what'll have to happen for him there. I think
if Blackish gets into either writing or directing, it'll be something to look at. And I think if it gets into both writing and directing, then I think we have to look really closely at it. But again, Tambor has that thing where he is Jeffrey Tambor. There's a seriousness in terms of, again, actor, capital A. There's a snob appeal. This is Jeffrey Tambor. He's royalty in television. It was funny. I was looking back at some old Emmy wins in categories where he lost. Oftentimes he lost to David Hyde Pierce, and David Hyde Pierce, who always is very, he's very complimentary to the other people in his category. He always mentions them by name, but I noticed it at least twice. He always said, something extra special about Jeffrey Tambor. So, this guy just has a reputation as being, the cream of the crop in terms of, television acting, and Transparent feels like a more important show. Now, granted, Blackish certainly made headlines this year with that particular episode. But Transparent still has, especially with all the LGBT stuff in the news with Orlando and the bathroom laws in North Carolina, which are still in the news, and Caitlyn Jenner making news for good and bad reasons, that there's still a I can't think of the word, but there's an immediacy to the topic of LGBT rights, and I think that's where they will reward Transparent, particularly if Veep ends up winning a lot of other things.
Yeah, that's interesting. Actually, that makes me think. It's not an especially funny show like a Veep is, and even the last time a dramedy won Best Comedy Series, which was Ally McBeal, that was still a funny show. But I feel like those external factors, those the Orlando shooting, the bathroom laws, the fact that this is very much a hot topic right now, voting for Transparent as Best Comedy Series could be a way to say, to stand up for the community in addition to rewarding the show itself. So that'll be very interesting to see when the nominations come out. If it looks bigger than it did last year, that might indicate the way the tide is turning.
Yeah. I think that really Transparent's big advantage is that it does seem to be such a prestige show, and you saw that really with the difference between season 1 and season 2 when you start to see some of the names that show up, and we already know that Caitlyn Jenner is going to, in some capacity, make an appearance on season 3. We don't yet know what capacity that is. But just the fact that, in season 2, you get people like Angelica Houston and Cherry Jones and Bradley Whitford coming back. And you have this, this prestige of these, Emmy, Oscar, Tony winning actors coming to do this, internet-based show, just tells you something about how relevant the show is and how prestigious the show is. And that could go a long way with Emmy voters.
You mentioned the writing categories and the directing categories, and I want to talk about those next. Transparent submitted 3 episodes for writing and 2 episodes for directing. For writing, it submitted the season premiere, Kinohora, Man on the Land, the episode we discussed as Jeffrey Tambor's likely submission, and The Book of Life, which is the Yom Kippur episode in which the Pfeffermans break their fast, and there's a lot of drama there with the children and their problems, and Josh reveals his breakup and his ex-girlfriend's miscarriage to the family, and it's one of those big kind of group ensemble episodes that sometimes seem to do really well in those categories. And for directing, Man on the Land and The Book of Life are also submitted, but I want to start here. We're both surprised that Jill Soloway, the director who directed 4 episodes in season 2, she submitted Man on the Land instead of Kinohora. I think she's competitive with either. I think she could definitely win with either. But we were both, we discussed this before we went live, both surprised that she would go with Kinohora. Talk a little bit about that and why you think she should have gone the other way.
Well, I think Kinohora opens with this beautiful scene where it's at the wedding, and the family is taking a picture, is trying to get set up to take a picture, and the whole thing is just one shot of the entire cast, the entire ensemble trying to get set up for a picture, and it feels like every family picture that every family has ever tried to put together in the history of ever, because they're all like, complaining about where to stand and how should I look this way, and it's one long shot, and it's so beautifully done. I mean, I knew in that I was like, well, that's an Emmy episode right there, just that one scene. I think why she ended up choosing Man on the Land is because Man on the Land, from a directing standpoint, she covers so many bases with that. There's a lot of camera work in that episode when they're at the women's festival, and they do a lot of perspective shots where Maura is walking through and kind of taking all of this in. And what Soloway does brilliantly is the point of view shots change when Maura, the storyline of the episode is that she goes to this Idlewild Women's Festival with her daughters, and in the beginning of the episode, she's very happy that she's there. She feels empowered. She's like, oh my God, this is just a wonderful thing. It's a bonding thing with her daughters. And halfway through the episode, she meets Angelica Houston, who in the midst of their conversation reveals to Maura that there's a rule at the festival that you have to be born female to attend. No trans women are allowed. And as soon as that happens, Soloway changes the directorial choices that she makes, where instead of the point of view shots being, having this sense of empowerment and freedom, they become very claustrophobic and very paranoid. And we see Maura walking through the field. And what's great is we don't know whether it's just her perception or whether that's really it, of people looking at her strangely. And then they get into the whole thing with the kind of the BDSM community and taking all of that in. Then there's that really powerful scene at the end where they're debating the whole no trans rule. There's a lot more. I think she chose that episode because there's more, I think, signs of direction on there. So I think that's why, but I think she could have won with Kinohora also, but this I think was the perfect choice.
It sounds like that's one of the episodes you've watched more than 3 times.
That would be one of the ones I watched more than I watched it. I actually, on the night that I binged it, after I watched all 10 episodes, I went back and watched the last 2 again. And then I watched the episode at least twice more when I wrote it up for the Jeffrey Tambor piece. that I wrote for Gold Derby. But yeah, there's a lot, and the interesting thing about it is it's such a rich episode that every time I've watched it, I've noticed something different. I've noticed something that just kind of stood out to me. But yeah, I think that shows more of her skill as a director, that episode, than Kinohora does.
I've only seen all the episodes once when I binged the season. What struck me about Kinohora was I don't know, I'd have to rewatch them to get a better sense of this, but it felt Kinohora, like from that first shot. The first shot is just like this is directing. That it could have been on top of that, but not in an ostentatious way that's like showing off. What I love about that opening shot in Kinohora is not just that it's a lot of characters, but there's a lot of character work being done in that scene. It's the season premiere. It's reintroducing all these characters to the audience, and it is doing so much work establishing who they are, where they are, how they are at this particular moment in one shot. And then there, in the middle of the episode, it mixes up with the first flashback to the 1940s or 1930s and 1940s in Germany that we eventually learn more context for as the season goes on, which is also very visually distinctive. And then, of course, it goes to that last closing shot where the camera is panning across all the hotel room windows after all the mayhem's happened at the wedding, and seeing each individual person where they are without hearing what they're saying, but in a sense, knowing what they're saying. So I personally loved Kinohora and would have submitted that if it were my choice. But she won last year with Best New Girl. I do think Man on the Land was probably even a stronger choice for her to win than that was then. So I at this point, I'd very much expect her to win that again.
Yeah, I do too. And you brought up the 1930s, Berlin stuff, which is a major thread through the whole season. And what's interesting is, because it was the first night that it was released, and I watched the entire series in one sitting, I was caught off guard by the Berlin stuff. And what I love about both Kinohora, as you were just describing Kinohora and comparing it to Man on the Land, in Man on the Land, they're doing kind of the same things structurally that they're doing in Kinohora, where you're getting like each character's experience in this setting, and then all of a sudden you go into, because there's a scene about the 1930s in Man on the Land too. They're structurally very similar episodes. So maybe again, they're both equally competitive. I just think that Man on the Land is a masterpiece. Writing and directing and acting wise.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how this show does below the line. One other thing that struck me about the show this season was, first of all, I mean, as we talked about the caliber of guest stars they got this season. I think casting is certainly on the table, especially Veep in its 5th year. There's less casting essentially to be done in a 5th year show. That's already established most of its main players. But Transparent was still growing its cast, still introducing new people, a lot of new people at Idlewild, a lot of new people in all these characters' lives. I think casting is certainly up for grabs. I think cinematography, it's one of the most beautifully shot shows categorized as a comedy this year. And best editing, I think, is another one that it could take. I have to check what it submitted in those categories, but basically any episode this season would have been competitive in those. And who knows, maybe even costumes again.
Well, it'd be interesting to see. I mean, I wonder if, because the show, certainly with Maura becoming more comfortable in her own skin this season, in many ways. And I had said this in the forums at one point, Maura really isn't the central character of this second season. To me, the second season is even more about the kids than it is about Maura. It's like, season 1 is about Maura's journey to herself. And then season 2 is all, to me, more about the impact of that and how this influences the kids in the direction of their lives. Which is where I think the show really gave all three of the actors, all three of those particular actors, really great stuff to work with, and really, really strong and powerful arcs that went over the course of the whole season.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually felt the same way, and I was surprised to feel that way when I watched it, because especially after season one, so much of the 90% of the attention for this show was lavished on Jeffrey Tambor's performance, deservingly so. But season two, it felt much more like an ensemble. It felt like, Maura certainly wasn't in the background, but at the end of the season, I could remember the conflicts of the children very clearly. And Maura seemed to be in more of an in-between state in her life. I was like, oh, what was her storyline this season? It was much more about continuing the transition and less about a lot of immediate drama that was happening to her, except in episodes like Men on the Land, where she's having that crisis of being afraid of being stigmatized further for being transgender, and her emotional reunion with her grandmother. With her mother, who we find that connection with the Berlin storyline. What did you think about that when that came together in that final episode?
In that final episode, I was a mess. I was an absolute mess, because and other people that I've talked to, saw the connection much sooner than I did. I really didn't get the connection until like halfway through the last episode. And when it hit, because through most of the season, I was going, what is with all of this Germany stuff? What was with all the, who is Gettel, and who is this mother, and why do I care? And why does Allie keep walking through the middle of the woods, and all of a sudden we're back in Germany? And then when it finally came together, and particularly the last shot, where we see Maura as Mort being born, and the camera cuts to this, to the baby just being born, cuts immediately from that to Jeffrey Tambor on the beach with his mother. Gone. I was gone. It was so brilliant how they made that work, and how they didn't telegraph it too well. And then looking back, when I watched it a second time, I was like, oh, of course, it was right there in front of me. But I think the way Jill Soloway, plots this show, she gives us just enough information without ever piling it on, without ever, hitting us over the head with it. This is not a preachy show. In fact, one of the things that's great about this, one of the complaints about season one was the fact that sometimes these characters are very unpleasant, and they make horrible, horrible decisions.
Occasionally in season two also.
Occasionally in season two also. But what I liked about particularly season two is that everybody, including Maura, is shown to be flawed. That Maura, has that great scene with Alexandra Billings, who plays Davina. I think it's episode 6 or 7, where Davina's longtime boyfriend has gotten out of prison and has a very uncomfortable interaction with Maura, and Maura basically goes to Davina and says, "You can do better than this." And her intentions are good, but the way she goes about doing it is just awful. And Soloway actually has it so that Maura gets put in her place a couple of times and saying, "Who do you think you are? You are not the almighty getting to dictate. You're entitled. Not all of us have the home in Pacific Palisades to go home to." And I like the fact that these characters develop. Sometimes they get better. Sometimes they take 2 steps backwards. We saw that with the Jay Duplass character, and also the Amy Landiker character, who had just the strangest arc this season. But it doesn't present these people as role models. It presents them as people first. And that's a really, when taking on a subject so delicate as LGBT rights, particularly with transgender issues, which have never really been put in the forefront of pop culture like they have been recently, they could have easily tried to make this a preachy, very special episode of Transparent, and they don't do that. And I think that's a testament to Jill Soloway's integrity as a writer, that, you know, she wants to tell a story and tell a story with real people and not types.
When you mentioned that, as you were describing that season finale, I was thinking, oh my goodness, Transparent did basically what Game of Thrones did in its season finale, with the cutaway from the baby to the adult Jon Snow, and you suddenly know, oh, that's who that is, except I didn't know because I couldn't keep up with whose fathers, sisters, brothers, lovers were whatever in the past. So like, I think Transparent actually did that a lot better.
Yeah, and especially, and I think they actually, you know, what's funny is that when, you know, there's a scene right before Mort is born where the husband and the mother are in the waiting room, and they're talking about names, and the father is sure that it's going to be a girl. He's positive that it's going to be a girl, and then, you know, you're like, wait a minute, and then they say it's a boy. It's like, oh, I mean, it's just little things that I think just set the show so far apart from anything else that's being done right now.
Well, I think that's a good place to end this Transparent discussion. It'll be very interesting to see how Transparent does the Emmys in season 2. Season 2 is always interesting for a lot of shows. A lot of shows go way up. Some shows stay the same. Some shows slip. It's really hard to tell how the affection for a second-year show will be. I think it will be really strong. I think it's going to at least equal what it did last year. So it'll be one to watch in July when the nominations are announced. So thank you everyone for watching, and we will see you again soon, hopefully with more of these.